All right, we are. I think we know why we're here, and my introductions try to be short and sometimes sweet and sometimes not. But I do want to get the cast, so I will be definitely short. There is a ton to say about him. He is either the most cited or the second most cited law professor ever. He has written hundreds of articles and a bunch of books. He writes more than I read. He has been working on nudges for decades. He wrote the book that coined the term. He also actually wrote a book on sludge, the first paper for which I believe was at this very DLJ Administrative Law Conference pre-COVID. He's won a prize in Norway, the Holberg Prize, which is tremendously prestigious. For our purposes, to my mind, his greatest claim to fame is that he held the most important job in the administrative state, which is to head OIRA. And the greatest compliment that I can give is I think everything that he writes repays the reading. I would read his grocery list, and I do not read my own grocery list. And he's also a tremendously nice person. So without any further ado, Professor Sunstein.
Okay, well, it's a joy and an honor to be here. This is an amazing institution, and the ripple effects, I'm looking at you, Matt Adler, I'm also looking at you students, the ripple effects of the work done at Duke are extremely large. It's like there are waves that you start at the Duke Law Journal or at Duke, and they build and build and build, and eventually something is happening at the United Nations or in the World Health Organization that was founded here. Also, the Duke Law Journal is amazing, and it's really an honor to be producing 1/trillionth of the amount of work that comes out of the Duke Law Journal. And so thanks to the editors for what you give to our species. These remarks are actually inspired by an email exchange. When I was in the government, there was a debate about calorie labels in which the content of the debate was, should the calorie labels be applied to movie theaters? With a number of people saying this is about chain restaurants, McDonald's and Subway, and it's not about Star Wars movies and Davy Jones and the Six, if, with God's blessing, we see that amazing television show in the theaters. That's not what the calorie labels are about. The calorie labels are about regular restaurants. Some people in the government, and I was among them, favored the yes movie theaters view, but that wasn't the dominant position. The dominant position was, we don't really have the data on movie theaters, so let's limit it to regular restaurants. That was the proposed rule. But the losers, and you're looking at one of them, succeeded in getting the preamble of the rule to say, we are not proposing including movie theaters, but we're asking for public comments on whether that might be a good idea. So we're interested in what the public has to say about that. And what happened was the public had a lot to say about that, and this is a case study in non-entrenchment. The public said this was in the national interest, given the data about health and consumption of Raisinets and potato chips at movie theaters. And so the ultimate final rule reversed and included the rule, applied it to movie theaters. So I was very excited about this and sent a note to a good friend celebrating the ultimate nudge in this case. And I got a 3-word response from my friend, Cass ruined popcorn. That was deflating, but also brilliant, because the thought was, as you're in the movie theater and you're about to enjoy, please, Star Wars, you're hoping to have a happy experience, not to think as you buy the popcorn, oh my gosh, I'm getting fat. That's not what you're there for. Okay, with that as background, I'm going to make one general argument that I hope won't be controversial, and that's an umbrella for three more, which might be controversial. Okay, the umbrella argument is that interventions informed by behavioral economics, including but not limited nudges, not including but not limited to nudges, like all other interventions from the administrative state, should be evaluated by reference to their effects on human welfare. That is a contested concept. I'm hoping this isn't a provocative claim. It might be because both academic work and intuition often points in directions that are not this one. So my umbrella concept, I'm hoping will not be provocative, but it actually has some skeptics, and I'm going to try to do a little work with the skeptics. Of the particular arguments, the one I mean to press most heavily is that it's really important to focus on the effects of behaviorally informed interventions on people's emotional states. And this is a gap in the administrative state's enterprise. Do the interventions make people feel sad or scared, or do they make them feel safe and hopeful? Do they make people feel powerless and despairing, or do they make them feel enthusiastic and joyful? These effects are part of the picture, only part of it, but they are frequently neglected. Has any of you got from Amazon their frustration-free packaging? You know about frustration-free packaging? I get shavers from Amazon and frustration-free packaging, and every time it arrives, it's for at least some of us a great thing, not because the shaver's so great, but because there's the shaver. You don't have to do any work to get the shaver. It's a pleasing experience. What Amazon is actually doing is something environmentally good, no plastic, no wires, less solid waste, but it is billed as frustration-free packaging, and Amazon on this kind of thing almost certainly knows what it's doing. So emotional states matter. The second point is it's extremely important for the administrative state to focus on the effects of behaviorally informed interventions on those at the bottom of the welfare ladder. Distributive justice counts. Some interventions that have beneficial aggregate effects don't help and might hurt people who are really struggling. That's not ideal. The third of the particular arguments is that personalized interventions have a lot of promise in increasing welfare. If you get recommendations on, let's say, Spotify for Amy Mann or for Taylor Swift, that's my club too. Hooray for that. And that is a welfare promoting thing. In part, in the terms of the administrative state, the personalized interventions can promote distributive justice and they can improve people's emotional states. An intervention might be applied to those who are least likely to lose from it, and it might also be applied or not applied to people at the bottom of the welfare ladder, depending on whether they would be helped or hurt. So moving parts, welfare at the top, emotional states, distributive justice, and personalization right under the umbrella. To see how the argument works, the first panel referred to home energy reports. They're a kind of nudge. Some governments are bullish on them. You might have received them, where you see how your energy use compares to that of your neighbors. The effects of the home energy reports might be to help people save money, to produce reductions in air pollution, including greenhouse gases, and they also cost some money to distribute. So that's basically it. And the economic analyses of the home energy reports are extremely positive about their impact. that the material benefits in terms of economic savings and environmental savings completely crush the costs. Here's the problem. A lot of people don't like receiving home energy reports. A lot of people don't think that makes the day a brighter day. Some people are very pleased to receive them. They're curious and they feel good about them, but a lot of people think they're kind of horrible. It looks like if we consider the emotional impact of receiving the home energy reports, the benefits, the net benefits are still positive. It's a good thing to do. But the overall welfare gains are dramatically overstated if we don't include the emotional impact. And that means that they are overstated by as much as $600 million, a factor of 3.7, a number of 3.7, which suggests that they're good, but much less good than we think. Subsequent to the email on the ruining of popcorn, here's some data we have with respect to calorie labels. The benefits exceed the costs. If we're using a straight cost benefit analysis, this is a good thing. Hooray for calorie labels. But there's an important wrinkle. People who are able to overcome self-control problems and who like the energy reports, like the calorie labels, like them a lot. So that's high benefits. But for people who have low levels of self-control, the benefits of the calorie labels look around zero in terms of changing consumption behavior, and they're just sadder and more ashamed. So they eat exactly what they would, but they have a worse experience, which raises the possibility that those who most need the calorie labels in terms of health and the population the labels are supposed to benefit are actually net losers. And the people who need the calorie labels least and benefit from them least are the winners. Okay, these are pretty straightforward. The third of my orienting cases is, I think, the most fun and intriguing. It hasn't been picked up by legal scholars or by people working on the administrative state, but it is the technical word awesome. Why don't people save money for retirement? What would help? Why aren't they saving money for retirement? The most intriguing contributors are twofold. People in thinking about money tend to be A, really anxious about the present, and B, really optimistic about the future. So they are scared about 2023 in terms of the economics, and they're very bullish about 2030 and 2031 in terms of how things are going to be for them. That is very specific. It suggests when people aren't saving for retirement, it's because this year really scares them and the future doesn't. That asymmetric present anxiety, future optimism can account for what we observe. It follows that mandatory saving, or even some nudges in favor of saving, might produce fear and distress, yes? And then the question is, what are we going to do about that? And now that we know what the problem is, maybe we'll have some clues about what to do. Okay, here are the questions for the administrative state to ask. And I wish there were 3. Alas, there are 5. Are you going to bear with me for 5 questions? First, what are the aggregate effects on social welfare? That's a less innocuous question than might appear, because often it's tempting to focus on expressive values, the kind of statements that regulatory initiatives make. I say, put statements in a little compartment and make it a really small compartment that's on the floor, and put effects on people's well-being in your view screen. Cost-benefit analysis is the best way of getting at the welfare question often, but it has serious flaws, and we've already have some clues about why. Second, we need to know the effects of interventions on people's emotional states. That's a subcategory of welfare effects, but it's neglected. Third, it's important to have a distributional analysis asking who was helped and who was hurt. Are we helping the top 2/3 and hurting the bottom third? That would be good to know. Fourth, what are the expected effects on the least well-off? A bow here to Professor Adler and his work on prioritarianism, which puts a spotlight on the effects on people at the bottom. Exactly how we cash out prioritarianism, so to speak, is an extremely fair and good question. Let's just say for now, the expected impact on people at the bottom is relevant and deserves separate consideration. Fifth, do the benefits to those who are helped exceed the cost to those who are hurt? I'm offering, let's say, 2.3 cheers on behalf of the much maligned Calder-Hicks criterion. It is rightly much maligned. Nonetheless, it is helpfully orienting. It's a good question to ask. Are the winners winning more than the losers are losing? The answer to that question isn't decisive, but the answer to that question is informative. Okay, those are our questions, and I promise I'm going to repeat them because there are so many. 5, 2 or 3 would be better. Okay, now let's get to a few details. You basically now have the text of the article. Are you ready for the footnotes? Footnotes are where all the interest lies. Footnotes are coming. Okay, I think we need a 2x2 table with respect to nudges at least, and let's start with them, where at the top there's the word architectural and the word educative, and on the side there's the word externalities and the word internalities. So we could imagine an educative nudge which tells you about whether the product you're buying has materials that come from something that financed mass atrocities. That would be an educative intervention designed to inform you of something with the goal of reducing an externality. Or the fuel economy label, this is less exotic. When you buy a car in the United States, it'll tell you something about greenhouse gases. And that is an educative nudge that is designed to reduce externalities. Think of that as it's got to be salient. It won't work if it's not salient. It's not manipulative. It's telling you something so that you could exercise your own agency. Now think of our 2x2 table as also having an educative nudge that might tell you how much it's going to cost to operate the car for a year if you travel as much as the average driver. And then you are giving an educative nudge to protect yourself against your own potential neglect of your future economic well-being. So it's designed to promote attention to the internality of buying a car that over the course of a year or 5 years is going to hit your wallet hard. Yes? Then we might imagine an architectural nudge, which would automatically enroll you in a savings plan, which would be designed to reduce an internality so that you would protect your future self. It would be architectural rather than educative. And we could imagine an architectural nudge. People tend not to love this very much, but an architectural nudge that would automatically enroll you in something that would help others. If you're automatically enrolled by Duke, for example, in a charitable giving plan, we know from data people don't like this very much. That would be in that box in the matrix. If you are automatically an organ donor, as the UK has not that long ago adopted, that is an architectural nudge designed to reduce externalities. So notice those are the 4 categories basically we'll be dealing with. And let's emphasize that policymakers and regulators are often keenly interested in behaviorally informed interventions that take the form of taxes, subsidies, or mandates. A fuel economy mandate is a behaviorally informed intervention that is designed to overcome internalities. People buy cars that won't cost them so much. big consumer savings, and externalities, of course, in the form of greenhouse gas emissions. Energy efficiency regulations, the same thing. And these may be, have an educative component, but typically they are architectural. Soda taxes are defended sometimes as a response to internalities as well as externalities. Okay, we have evidence that some nudges significantly increase participation rates. The most dramatic of these, which is fun as well as poignant, is from the District of Columbia, where if people are asked, do you want to participate in an educational technology by which you sign up and learn about the educational, let's say, performance of your kid, the participation rate in the District of Columbia is, guess what? 1%. Horrible. People have to go to a website to sign up? They don't. A behaviorally informed intervention by the administrators is to say, okay, you don't have to go to the website, it's just going to be in your text message. Just click on the text message and you're in. You get an 800% increase in participation rates from 1% to 8%. That's terrible. Or people are automatically enrolled, in which case they are in the technology, they don't have to do anything. The participation rate is well north of 90%, from 1% to in the vicinity of 95%. And the educational results for kids are really good in terms of everything that matters, in terms of student performance. Okay, we know that an educative nudge or a change in architecture might have a bigger benefit per unit of cost than of alternatives, though the alternatives, the opposite might also be true. Okay, if you're with me so far, you'll be noticing that the aggregate effects won't tell the administrators what they need to know. An increase in participation by itself doesn't tell us whether social welfare is increasing, whether identifiable groups are being helped, whether there's unintended harm to some or many, or whether the program should be redesigned in an important way. If people are automatically enrolled in a book club in which they receive every month a behavioral economics book, some of us would be very happy about that. Some of us not so much. Maybe a majority even of this room, not so much. Behavioral economics books tend to be very expensive, and we might not opt out. People might shift from one kind of a not good to another, and that might be not so good. So this is the suggestion that the emphasis on welfare effects is going to put an X across the frequent effort to demonstrate net benefit by showing an increase in participation rates. An increase in participation rates doesn't tell us welfare benefits. There are similar limits to a demonstration of cost effectiveness. And I'll confess, I've seen the point I'm about to make to you getting, let's say, uneasy discussions within the US government. I think they should be easy discussions, but they're uneasy. They are sometimes uneasy discussions. So what I'm about to suggest is the demonstration of cost effectiveness for an intervention are less exciting than you might think. Suppose that one intervention saves 50 lives at a cost of $1, where another saves 100 lives at a cost of $100 million. The first is really cost effective. The ratio is 50 to 1. The second is not as cost effective. The ratio is much lower. The magnitude of net benefits is what matters, not the cost-benefit ratio. Saving 50 additional lives at a cost of $99.999 million is a terrific benefit, at least if we value a statistical life at about $12 million, as the US government typically does. A cost-effective approach to producing an undesirable end would be nothing to celebrate. and we could imagine a behaviorally informed approach to promoting gambling, smoking, or alcoholism, they could work, they'd still be terrible. So what we want to focus on is welfare, not cost effectiveness. Okay, how do we know whether something has promoted welfare? Okay, John Rawls, in a footnote he didn't publish, it was a manuscript that he never put in a book, had a response to a theoretically difficult question in which Rawls wrote, we post a signpost, no deep thinking here, things are bad enough already. So let's not do deep thinking about welfare, but just notice that there are a range of things that can be resolved without making contentious claims about welfare. And I'm going to try to skirt surfaces of welfare foundational questions as a way of making progress on what could be quite contentious. Okay, suppose people are automatically enrolled in green energy. I tell you some data. In Switzerland, Germany, and Southern California, an odd trilogy of countries. Is Southern California a country yet? Maybe not yet. An odd trilogy of places that people are automatically enrolled in green energy. So you want to use coal, go for it, but you're automatically in green energy. By Switzerland, this is a result of a national initiative. By Germany, in Germany, it's a little bottom up. If you look at greendefaults.org, I think it's called, in Southern California, you can see an initiative that's enlists state and local and national initiatives to get people in large numbers in green energy. The data shows that in Switzerland, where we have a lot of numbers, the net benefits are through the roof. So on welfare grounds, it's terrific. Okay, we need to know the answer to that question to know whether to celebrate or lament an increase in participation rates in green energy. And we know in Switzerland and almost certainly in Southern California and Germany too, a celebration is in order. But it's really important, isn't it, to know whether people at the bottom of the economic ladder are helped or hurt? It's very plausible to think in some of these places, and we know it's true in Switzerland, that green energy is more expensive. If people at the bottom of the economic ladder are being hammered, then we might want to rethink our initiative. Architectural nudges that have adverse effects on those at the bottom might need some rethinking, even if they have highly beneficial effects on aggregate. If an architectural nudge harms identifiable people of color, poor people, the elderly, women, people suffering from physical or mental disabilities, people of color, then we have a problem. Something like this might also be true of educative nudges. Recall the data from calorie labels. It might be the case that calorie labels are hurting people who are struggling most. Maybe they are suffering from problems of self-control and bad health and poverty. If that's the case, then on grounds of distributional justice, we might be gravely concerned. There's reason to worry, I think, that home energy reports, at least in some communities, have a similar feature. It must be that there's heterogeneity in relevant populations where many people think that the home energy report is doing the equivalent of ruining their popcorn. And many people might be agitated about whether to engage with this particular small economic savings in view of the large number of things that they have to worry about. A more targeted set of nudges, giving the reports to people who would most benefit from them, would be preferable on welfare grounds. And that's a point to which I'm going to return. Okay, the remarks in the last few minutes have signaled the possibility that a nudge or other behaviorally informed intervention could have negative distributional effects or negative effects on emotional well-being, and that's a problem. Let's notice the, I think, intriguing complexity of the inquiry. Complexity usually reduces reduces subjective well-being. In this case, my hope is for all of us, it won't have that adverse effect. Think a little bit, if you would, about soda taxes. That's not a nudge, but it's often behaviorally defended as a response to present bias on the part of consumers. So the reason you have the soda tax is to correct the internality. Many people worry that the distributional effects of the soda tax are alarming, that it's a regressive tax, either because low-income consumers particularly like high-calorie soda drinks, or because even if there's no distributional skew in preferences, $1 in the hands of someone with money is worth a lot more than $1 in the hands with someone without money. And if you impose a uniform tax, that's going to hurt people at the bottom of the economic ladder more. Okay, the reason this is intriguingly complicated is if the hypothesis is true that poor people are distributionally consuming high-calorie drinks, then it's also the case that they are the disproportionate beneficiary of the intervention. So on the benefit side, they are the gainers as well as the losers. They lose in terms of upfront income. They might lose in the form of consuming a drink they enjoy less, but they gain in terms of health benefits. So it might be that it's not regressive at all. It might be progressive on balance. That possibility for behaviorally informed taxes and mandates maps on nicely to some terrific data we have about nudges that increase automaticity. And the finding that is part of an initial stream of research that lawyers, I think, including yours truly, haven't adequately taken on board, is that some forms of nudges dramatically reduce barriers that are asymmetrical contributors to harm faced by people at the bottom of the economic ladder. Okay, here's a kind of top-line way to get at the data I'm going to describe. The Office of Management and Budget's not long ago report on equity had as its second finding, finding number 2, that barriers and administrative burdens are a particular source of inequity with respect to the administrative state. So think, if you would, about licenses, permits, job opportunities, educational opportunities, et cetera. OMB's finding is that the administrative burdens before people can get access to this is a particular source of inequity. Can I tell you a tale? That's about data-based research from the US government that is resonating throughout the federal bureaucracy. I'll tell you something that's a story rather than data. I was at a lunch with about 7 students from a very good university, one of America's really good universities. Not this one, but also excellent. And at that university, I asked the students, I was just curious, in terms of the health facilities at the university, is there anything wrong? Is there anything you'd fix? And one of them said, yes, I suffer, the student said, from a problem of depression. And I tried to get help, and I had administrative burdens that were horrifying. The number of people I had to talk to, the number of people I had to engage with, the number of people I had to talk to about my depression was really high, and I was getting more and more depressed, and I gave up. The person had a sense of humor and was not self-pitying, but was more incredulous about this. And then there was another student in the small group of 7 who kind of rolled his eyes, and he said, you have depression and you couldn't get help? I have anxiety. And that student said, the administrative barriers I had to overcome to get help with anxiety, my anxiety went through the roof. And I also gave up. It was a pretty genial lunch, but it's an example of the crushing blows that administrative burdens often impose on people who are struggling most for one reason or another. Okay, I promised or threatened you data. The suggestion is that smart defaults that nudge people toward options that are most likely to suit their situations turn out to have really big income benefits for low-income choosers, choosers with less domain-relevant expertise, and choosers who aren't so good with numbers. That's the finding. At the same time, we know that that nudge, which automatically enrolls poor kids in the United States, including homeless children and migrant children, on distributional grounds, are likely to have really good effects. In terms of educative nudges, the basic point, we talked a little bit on the last panel about the problem of cognitive scarcity, where there are a number of people, in fact, 100% of people, who suffer from that problem. If you don't, you're not a person, you're Chat GPT, and I want you out of this room. If you're a person, you suffer from cognitive scarcity, and people who are struggling with, let's say, illness or a lot of work or old age or some sort of cognitive something face the problem particularly severely. Educative nudges, which remind people you have a doctor's appointment tomorrow, or you're going to have to pay a fee if you don't pay your bill tomorrow, they ought to help people at the bottom of the economic ladder. To the extent that warnings or reminders target people who are busy, occupied, or inattentive, their distributional effects might turn out to count in their favor. I'm going to tell you a little story from the US government about the administrative state. It's like a universe in a grain of sand, and take this as a journalistic account, meaning not very fine-grained, but from someone who was there and whose memory tends not to go way off. So this is probably basically what happened. The FCC proposed to do something about bill shock. So the thought was, about a decade ago, that a number of consumers end up facing a cellular bill which is crushing and surprising. The reason it's crushing and surprising is that there are various fees that they didn't know they were incurring. They might be overuse fees, they might be out of service keys, they might be international fees that they didn't anticipate. So the idea was to have a rule that would require this. My recollection is this was welfare-based and fairness, that people should, some combination of welfare and fairness. But it had a particular resonance among people who are struggling economically, both because those fees were really awful for them and not really awful for people with plenty of money, and because of the comparative lack of attention was acute, let's say, among people who are trying to figure out what to do to pay for their children's whatever. The response of the industry to this was to say, you're about to regulate us? Oh my gosh, we're going to do it voluntarily. And they came out with a public event, which got a public relations boost. This has something to do with the paper on the last panel. They did it voluntarily and started nudging their customers. We also know on the regulatory side that the CARD Act, which has behavioral economics all over it, which has a bunch of nudges, but also mandates designed to protect consumers from unanticipated charges, has produced billions of dollars in benefits to consumers, and that the benefits are concentrated among people with not good credit ratings. That's a terrific distributional outcome, which I think wasn't squarely anticipated by the people who drafted it. Okay, taxes are not nudges, but architectural nudges designed to reduce consumption of high-calorie foods and cigarettes. I think we've not said enough to say, call for a full accounting of both benefits and costs, and for an accounting of the distributional characteristics. Okay, on the foundational issues, I'm just going to gesture lightly to the possibility that we will have a distributional analysis that tries to segment, let's say, 5 quintiles, and figure out what are the effects of nudges on each of the five. Or we might be prioritarians and think more simply, what is the aggregate effect? What is the effect on people at the bottom? And as the effect on the people at the bottom gets more negative or less wonderful, we might be willing to sacrifice in terms of the aggregate effect on well-being. Okay, let's turn, shall we, to targeting and personalization. The broadest lesson, the kind of plea, is that in addition to considering emotional impacts and distributional effects, we ought to focus, by virtue of that commitment, on interventions that are more targeted, which can address distributional concerns and produce much higher welfare benefits. With respect to home energy reports, and consider this a placeholder, if you would, for any number of interventions, suppose that the population consists of three groups of people. The first really loves the reports, like Professor Adler. For him, when he receives it, the day is really better. It's brightened, not only because of the potential economic savings, but also because of the satisfaction and gratification that come from taking steps toward energy conservation. For members of this group, the benefits of the reports significantly exceed the economic savings. And actually, there are a lot of people like that, the data show, who love the nudge, not only because of the material benefit. The second group, let's say, is cold-blooded. They have no affective response, positive or negative, to the reports. The only question is economic. They are University of Chicago people. They think, how much money can they save? The third group is emotional about the report. When they receive it, they think, that's terrible. I feel guilty and put upon. For them, the potential economic savings are recognized, but they're thought to be a rounding error. What they want is not to have to bother with this emotionally negative and cognitively demanding imposition on their time. We might want to ensure, mightn't we, that the first two groups receive the reports and members of the third group don't. A qualification consistent with the first panel is that the people who hate the report, the third group, might not have fixed opposition to the report. It might be that their preferences and reactions are evolving and endogenous. They might hate the report in January and February, but by July they might think it's fine. And maybe by September they think, I kind of like it. Makes me feel good about myself and I can save money. And that would suggest we need to have a full spectrum analysis, not just a one-shot analysis. Now suppose for a second category that the green energy default, automatic enrollment in green energy. Does Durham have that, by the way? Are you automatically enrolled in green energy? Hey, can I tell you a little story in favor of automatic enrollment in green energy? When I lived in New York, I got a letter in the mail saying, hooray, you can go into green energy if you fill out this form and mail it in. And it won't cost you a penny more, just be environmentally better. Do you want to do it? And my reaction was a mild emotional plus and a serious commitment to doing it because it was environmentally better and it would make me feel better. And I lost the form within a day. I'm still looking for it. Okay, let's suppose that the cost of energy is increased in a population where people are automatically enrolled, as in Switzerland, and the level of pollution is decreased. We could easily imagine communities or nations for which automatic enrollment is justified on welfare grounds. We could imagine those in which it really isn't. Suppose it is justified, it might nonetheless be the case that higher costs hurt people really badly at the bottom of the economic ladder. We might have a few things to do to help them, including subsidies for them to offset the cost, but it might be that we would want to have a personalized system of automatic enrollment. I think, by the way, if this seems exotic, it is the wave of the future. It's coming. It's almost here. With respect to educative nudges, we could imagine the same thing. It doesn't sound extremely lovely, and it might run into political opposition as discussed, but we could imagine calorie labels for thee, but not for me. We could imagine a situation in which calorie labels are provided only to those individuals and those groups that would benefit from them. They might benefit from them because they would make healthier choices as a result, because they would find it good to learn about the caloric content of food, or both. People who don't make healthier choices as a result and would think, why are you ruining my popcorn, would not receive them. I bet you could think of cases in which the argument for personalized nudging is airtight and terrific, and which on one or another grounds it's very bad. And it's extremely interesting to think of what distinguishes them. The cases in which they are very bad might be cases in which there are externalities, or in which we think people's preferences are shifting and not frozen. They might be very bad if they have a presumption of inequality along some important dimension based into them. Okay, I'm just about done. I promised you that I would recite the 5 questions, and here they are. You ready? We can't investigate whether to approve or disapprove of a behaviorally informed intervention without asking what are the aggregate effects on social welfare, not about cost effectiveness, and not about increasing participation, without asking with a degree of kind of humanity and empathy about the effects of interventions on people's emotional states. We really want to know who was helped and who was hurt. That's number 3. We want to know the expected effects on the least well-off. That's always a really important question. And we want to know whether the benefits to those who are helped exceed the costs to those who are hurt. I've emphasized, and if there's any single theme that emerges from this that's not instantly forgettable, I hope it's this: to consider the effects of interventions on people's emotional states. Are interventions alleviating or increasing anxiety? Do they induce a smile or a grimace? Do they give people a sense of confidence and security, or a sense of helplessness and dependency? These questions matter partly because an intervention is going to be more effective if it doesn't make people feel terrible or miserable. Good luck with an intervention that makes